report in.
Red 10 standing by.
Red 7 standing by.
Red 3 standing by. Red 6 standing by.
Red 9 standing by.
You're listening to the Ion Cannon Podcast.
Laugh it up, fuzzball.
Your source for entertainment reviews from a galaxy far, far away.
This is it.
Hey, laser clankers! Welcome to the Ion Cannon Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Steven, and I'm joined by my friends and co-hosts, Tom and William. Today, we're talking about the season finale of Season 1 of The Bad Batch, titled Kamino Lost. No announcements, because we already know we've got a Season 2 coming. So, Tom, take it away. Tell us about this final episode.
Well, the final episode of The Bad Batch Season 1, Episode 16, titled Kamino Lost, was directed by Sal Ruiz and written by Jennifer Corbett. In this episode, the Bad Batch find themselves in unexpected territory in this thrilling finale, which is part 2 of 2. So, we know there's a Season 2 coming. This really doesn't end on a cliffhanger, but it picks up exactly where last week ended, with the complete destruction of Kamino.
In many ways, this felt like an extended disaster movie, right? That's really all it was.
It's like the Poseidon Adventure.
Yeah, exactly. Where it's like, okay, you got to get out of here and you got to escape. And from that standpoint, I loved it. It was really cool seeing Kamino, as we talked about. Like, it was a gut punch last week, and it's just that nonstop the rest of the episode. And I think from that standpoint, I really liked the episode quite a bit, and it's all about, can they escape to Poca City as it plummets to the bottom of the ocean, which is crazy cool.
Yeah, and there were times in which you were going back and forth, going, is one going to make it? Is one not going to make it? And it to me it worked. I mean, you did get the feeling that they were running out of time. Every time there was a bit of a breather, there was something else that popped up as a challenge to get in their way.
Yeah. Steven, what did you think?
I take issue with the synopsis calling this a thrilling finale.
Okay.
If this were an episode in the middle of the season, if this had been the penultimate episode, I would have been totally happy. As it was, I was just a little bit bored with it. Like, I didn't feel like we really were treading any new ground. Like, we got the same character beats we've been getting all season, and those are good character beats. I enjoyed getting to see them again, but after the previous episode having this massive climax, it just left me a little bit lacking. Yeah. It lacked the emotional send-off that I think we'd seen in any of the Clone Wars finales in many cases, or I don't know. Like, it's one of those things where I almost wonder if this was meant to be, if they'd originally been planned to have this be the last episode of the show, if this was a series finale, and it was meant to end on a kind of somber note of, and a little bit of wistfulness for the future. And I just felt like it was missing some energy.
So I'm going to throw a question out to you. So do you think that a proper season finale for this one going into second season would have been last episode, and they pick up on this one starting second season?
I don't know that this would work well as a season opener either. Yeah. And it's, in some ways, I think there's a little bit of, I almost wish they had announced season 2 after this, maybe. Because the entire time I'm watching the episode, there was no stakes because there's a season 2. Like, clearly they're going to survive.
Okay, I can see your point on that.
The one kind of gut punch they tried to pull was the why am I blanking on his name?
AZ.
Yeah. And even then, they didn't have. It's like, oh, you picked the one character
you care least about.
We can, congratulations. No, and I don't care that much about AZ personally. And even then, they still let him come back and live.
So
okay,
so Steven, I actually agree with you on a lot of these points. I'm torn about this episode, and you'll notice when I was talking about it earlier, my initial thoughts on the episode, I very carefully phrased it, intentionally so, because I think I did really love seeing the destruction of Kamino and the disaster movie and how they have to escape and well, I think we'll go more into that in in detail later in this review. I think they did such a wonderful job
Mhm.
with it as an episode where you have to see the death of Kamino, basically, and the end of Kamino.
Right.
And from that standpoint, it was emotional, right? Because it was exciting trying to see them escape, even though we know they're mostly probably all gonna live, right?
Right.
And yet, like you, Steven, I don't know if this worked as well as the season finale. It felt. I almost think it would have been great. I wish they had shown these 2 episodes, released them on the same day, like back to back, like they did with the season premiere.
That might have helped too.
Because
That
this
might have
really
helped,
was the
yeah.
epilogue to last week. And if you look at it like that, I think it works a lot better. But still, it's a little bit of an odd finale. I think typically in a season finale with Star Wars, there's a big cliffhanger or there's a big exciting tease for the next season. And maybe it's because they didn't know if they're going to get a second season or something. I don't know what the reason for that is, but there wasn't really any of that. Like there's the Nala Se tease at the end, but it's a very light tease. And
The ordering just felt off to me.
Yeah.
Like we get a lot of great interactions between Crosshair and Tech, or Crosshair and Wrecker, or Crosshair and why am I blanking on her name? Omega. Thank you.
That's all right.
And they're all fantastic scenes. But I'm already kind of we've had the emotional climax in the previous episode, and so I had a much harder time. Like, got it. We're not gonna have them get back together. The band's not getting back together.
Right.
And they left it very ambiguous about like Crosshair's his future. You know, is he going back to the Empire? Is he not?
Yes.
They didn't really do the redemption, but they didn't not do his redemption. They also tried to. Actually, I think the part of the episode that annoyed me the most was when they were back in Nala Se's lab, and they repeated exactly what they said last week, as if it was a revelation. I'm like, this isn't new. We learned this all last week.
Well, no, I got something.
Also,
else,
why are you asking what room we're in? You guys were here like 2 hours before.
Hang on. So first of all,
okay, go ahead,
William. So I'm so many pieces here. First, I actually didn't mind. Hunter is the one who asked where they were. Hunter's the only person who hadn't been in that room.
Right.
Was he
So
not?
actually,
Was
I
he
like
not?
that detail.
Yes.
Oh,
No, because
you're
Hunter was
right.
captured.
Yeah.
Of course. Okay, that makes me feel better. You are right, Steven. Great.
So that I actually liked that
Fair
line.
point.
I'm like, oh great, we're gonna revisit what was happening in this lab. Omega's gonna talk again about what she's seen. And I've been bored about the episode up till this point, and I'm like, oh, we're gonna finally find out what Nala Se is doing. No, we're not. Never mind. Okay. And it's just,
rehash of last week. Move on.
Yep. And I was just like, why are we repeating?
It was more
like
they weren't as subtle. The last week they're a little more subtle, right? But all they did was just hit you in the face with it. Like, oh, they explicitly said, oh yeah, Omega is older, right? Where last week she said, oh, I was here when you guys were created, which is the same thing. But
yeah, but like I find it so funny because we're going to talk about what happens in the episode, but there's a very real part of me that looks at this episode and is like, okay, so let me describe what happened. They go underwater. They barely escape from sinking city. They continue underwater. They continue to escape from the city. They've got some good character moments, and then they get to the shuttle, and then they're done.
Right.
Oh, and AZ almost dies because reasons. And I needed something more. Even the tease at the end with Nala Se didn't give you any actual information. I think you're right. If this had been following the previous episode to let you like, oh wow, I'm emotionally going through the destruction of Kamino, that like we talked about that last, like there's this is the end of the Clone Wars, and then you have a little bit of a drawn out conclusion. Maybe you could do an extended like 45-minute episode instead of 2 half hours. I don't know. And I think that would have worked much better. It
still would have been weird because it didn't really have that tease for the next season. And you don't necessarily have to, I guess. But I think it would have worked better if you'd seen it all at once because you would have had that excitement and then the extended escape.
You would have done the processing at the same time as the characters.
Yes.
We processed the destruction of Kamino, the end of an era, a week ago. And then a week later, we went into the finale. And even the title of the episode, Kamino Lost, I did that double take of like, wait, wasn't that the title of the last episode? Oh no, last episode was Return to the Camino, and now we're Kamino Lost. Even the titles feel very similar to me and are evoking the same themes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a fine episode. It just lacked what I wanted to see out of a finale.
Okay, I want to hold off the one thing that bothered me about this episode until we get closer to the end, because if I were to do it, there was one part of me that was literally a flashback to a completely different movie that happened. And it was almost, to me, the same beats to a completely different movie. I want to get there when we get to the end of the movie. I don't want to spoil it at this point because we're the one thing I don't want to do is there were some really good character moments when they were in the tunnel and it's like Wrecker was sitting there back and forth with Crosshair. And then you had Tech sit there and kind of defend Crosshair. Mm-hmm. And then Crosshair was like, why did you defend me, or why did you do this? And Crosshair, his line that came back was, just because I'm defending you doesn't mean I agree with you, or whatever it was.
Fantastic line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that was totally something that would come out of Tech's mouth because it was logical.
Yeah. No, and I think the magic of this episode, because this is why I'm so torn on this episode, because I think how it was released and the placement and just how it functions as a season finale, I was less excited about. But the episode itself, I loved, right? And
yes.
I aside from the fact that, again, I think the only problems I had with the episode were the fact that it, at how it served as a season finale, right? The fact that they've been teasing all this stuff with Omega, but they didn't even really try to hint all that much, and the only hints they did were a reiteration of last week. But again, that's more how it deals with how it happened, how it is a season finale. If you look at it from a great episode, mm-hmm. I love it, right? I loved seeing that disaster movie, how they have to escape Kamino and how everything's going wrong. Kamino's going under the water, and the sound design and the editing and the cinematography and the lighting is all gorgeous. Like the way David Collins, one of the sound designers, was talking about this, how they tried to make it almost the city, Tohoku City, had personality, and the groans and the metal and everything is, almost sound like an animal dying or a crying whale song. Like, wonderfully done. I loved all of that. And then the character interactions, the dynamic between the characters, wonderful. And that's why I'm so torn on this episode.
Yeah. You brought up the underwater stuff. The one thing that I got a real big kick out of was the fire underwater, or just that lighting of the city as it's going under, and you see all the red in there and the destruction, and as it's going down, you see all the pieces just keep falling, and the pieces ended up being, a story point when our heroes were trying to escape the lab to go to the surface. These pieces are falling, and just how it was all done was just beautiful.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Now the animation continues to be top notch. The sound design is top notch. The music is top notch. Oh. And you both know that I am horrible at noticing music in all of these types of things.
Right.
And so I picked it up, and that should tell you something.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it did really feel like you're back on Kamino, and the clone theme for the last time in a very somber way. It was just, so well done. Even the little details, like when, Rampart and the Empire are preparing to leave, and one of the clone troopers comes up and reports that Kamino has been destroyed, basically, and he has that little hesitation in his voice. The tiny little details like that, because we talked about last episode, these clones were firing on their own home.
Yep.
And you could see that emotion there, where he was following orders, but you could tell he was still sad that his home had been destroyed. All the little details, just so wonderfully done.
Yeah. And did you guys notice again this time the clones that were in the bay still had the Republic logo on the sleeve?
Oh, I missed that. That's a good detail.
Yeah, it's still there.
It's almost cool. They didn't swap them out with the new, stormtroopers. It's like, nope, you get to blow up your own home. Let's go.
Yeah. I think what would be interesting, and this is what I'm looking forward to going into next season, is when Rampart says, let's leave and go join the fleet. Okay, so how big is the fleet at this moment? How many clones are there? Will we start seeing actual Imperial Star Destroyers or more of that design? I mean, going forward, I'm looking forward to seeing the transition that we are starting to see coming out of the Clone Wars, going into the beginning of the Empire. And then how many of the clones will actually be left over when the TKs start taking over? Are they still going to be the commandos that are going to be training the TKs? At some point, will the commandos be turned on? Or retired, like we found out in Rebels, Rex was put out to pasture along with Gregor and Wolf.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suspect we'll see more of the same themes in the next season, and I wonder if that will be a major part of Crosshair's arc as well.
Right.
This episode, as I kind of expected, doubles down on Crosshair is. I was going to say thematically, that's not right. Morally, that's not right either. He is aligned with the Empire in terms of ideology.
Right.
He's there because he wants to be there. Is that maybe the better way to describe it?
I think our theories were wrong last week. Like I guess he did remove his inhibitor chip, unless they're saving that for season 2. You know,
hang on. I said
sorry,
it.
I was wrong. You were right, Steven.
Thank you. You said it again for the record. I just don't get to hear it very often.
But I have a question on that. When they were in their old quarters and he was sitting over there on the ledge when everybody decided to figure out a way to get out, and I loved how Wrecker's just like, one, the room smelled better, and two, their notches were still on the wall, which was great to see all these wins and no losses, which I found very funny. But Crosshair's sitting on the ledge right before Omega shows up. He's grabbing his head, almost like he's got this bad headache. So the biggest question now is he lying about the inhibitor chip that's removed? Or is the inhibitor chip damaged and he's kind of fighting it? I mean, that's my question I have if you watch that scene.
It could be. I kind of wish I wish they at least teased that a little more in this episode as like it's a finale. I get not wanting to wrap up completely Crosshair's story, but I don't know.
I think it's not. I think it's neither. I think we are meant to take the earlier scene from much earlier in the season, where we see Crosshair being in the chamber.
Yep.
That is him having the chip removed or nullified. And Crosshair is aligned with the interests of the Empire. He believes that is the best path forward for the galaxy. And I think we're going to see the next season be about maybe him changing his mind as he sees and deals with what the rest of the Empire is doing.
Mm-hmm.
I hope he still does change his mind. I think he will. I think he'll have like a Agent Callus type of moment. Oh shoot, I'm on the wrong side. I suspect so as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious to see what happens though. If I were the Empire, when they pick up Crosshair at the end, I just probably kill him.
So
I would agree with that.
Yeah. So okay,
there's not a reason for them to keep him around.
Yeah.
So what do you like? He ends. The episode ends with Crosshair just hanging out on the landing pad by himself. Does the Empire come for him? I guess they made a mention that like they have to get out before some scouts come, but
right.
I'm not sure why they're bringing scouts back after Rampart left. I don't know. So maybe it's the
Empire. I mean, the Empire is probably going to look. Put it this way: they probably kept people at the Jedi Temple once Anakin went through and destroyed it. So they're probably going to have somebody just scouts every once in a while go back because hey, it's the Empire. But here's the thing: will they accept Crosshair back? Because remember, in the last episode, one of his troops did get away and did tell Rampart that to a certain extent he can't be trusted anymore. He's been compromised or whatever.
And Rampart was willing to fire on the city while Crosshair was there.
Yeah, and it's like, and we all know the Empire doesn't care about their troops because they're replaceable. Especially now the TKs, they can get them whenever they want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be very interesting. I mean, the batch tried, right, in this episode, and it was I did love the character moments and seeing how, Crosshair throughout this episode, they keep trying to give him opportunities to join them, right? To change his mind. Like Omega, right at the beginning, he's trapped underwater, under a beam, and the room is filling up with water. I have to say, by the way, quick side tangent. This scene was so well done, and just the fear and the tension as the room is filling up with water and Omega and Crosshair are stuck, and you have like the ticking music, like a clock is running out of time. Oh, so good. And they eventually get out, but like Crosshair would have died had Omega not saved him, and AZ not saved him. And while he does return the favor later on, it doesn't change his mind at all, or any of the discussions he has with his brothers later. He's still insistent that the Empire is the right thing, and they're in control, and he wants to have a part of the Empire, and not join his brothers.
But that's the one thing. Even though he sits here and saves Omega, he does make that crack where she keeps bringing up suggestions, and what does he go? It's just like, oh, you're taking advice from a child now, Oh
yeah.
It's like, yeah, and you look at it from the point. Do you think at this point is he redeemable from that aspect?
I think anyone's redeemable.
I think he is, but only in that we haven't really, other than I guess than on Onderon, we haven't really seen him do anything particularly dastardly. Well, it's probably happened off screen, but on screen at least.
No, that is true, because remember when he did save AZ and Omega, once he brought them to the surface by using that grappling hook, basically you had Wrecker, Tech, and Echo were all had their guns pointed at him.
Yeah, but I did actually really, that moment was so well done where it looks like Omega and AZ are gonna die, and then instead of Crosshair starts to point his blaster at what looks like Hunter, but he's actually aiming into the water and shoots the grapple and saves Omega and AZ. But again, like I think they were pointing at the blasters at him because they thought he was gonna maybe shoot Hunter or something, or shoot Omega. But at other times, like Wrecker flat out says, we would have taken you back.
Right.
He's very upfront about this to Crosshair. They will bend over backwards to get Crosshair back with them. He just doesn't want to join.
And even Omega at the end says, you know what? They're my brothers, and so are you.
Yep.
So
which
now
is pretty heartbreaking.
I think now's a point where I can get to where the rescue effort.
Okay.
Because now we're going to talk about AZ.
Yes.
Do you think he is a character that technically needed to be saved?
I was thinking he was going to die, right?
Okay.
And that they weren't going to save him. I guess the group needs a droid aside from, Gonki, and maybe he'll join them in season 2. But I thought he was going to die. It was such a great moment when, they're using those medical capsules to get to the surface, and AZ's bouncing back and forth, beautifully shot. The lighting and everything is gorgeous. He's like bouncing back and forth, trying to, avoid the debris so they can make it to the surface. And then, Omega gets hit. Her capsule starts going. He goes after Omega, and he's running out of power. And it's just this moment where you start to feel, even though you don't have that much, AZ he was in the Clone Wars and stuff, but you still don't have that much attachment to him.
Right.
And he runs out of power, and you just see him start to fall back into the deep ocean. I was expecting him to die. And it kind of be the big sacrifice in this episode.
So I'm happy that you brought this up, because everything you described is what bothered me about that sequence. Because yes, it was beautifully shot. Yes, Omega did the crazy thing to, sacrifice herself to go save him. But up to that point, there was a different movie that kind of had the same ending. From, it's a superhero movie as well. It had this big white robot in it, and was in this kind of netherworld that was trying to get, I'm going to say it, Hiro Hamada to safety. So to me, that came.
Tom, William, do you know what movie he's talking about?
I have no idea.
Okay,
no idea.
Big Hero 6.
Oh,
There's
right.
a moment.
Okay,
Yeah,
it's been
I
a
don't-
long time since I've seen it.
I get it, Tom. I don't think that's nearly as obvious as I think you think it was.
Okay, I'm sorry. To me, it depends on, I'm an animation freak, but I sat there and I'm like, I agree, Steven, it's not as obvious. But to me, it was there. And it's one of those things where you're looking at it just going, it did it differently because technically Baymax, now that we're out of it, Baymax didn't make it.
Yeah.
This time AZ made it.
Well, I think,
Yeah.
I think the reason I was expecting AZ to die was because throughout the entire episode we hadn't had that much yet. I knew we were getting near the end, right? Maybe something's got to happen, and so I thought maybe it's gonna be AZ's death. It won't hit us as hard, but that's fine,
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Omega immediately jumps out of her pod, still far below the surface of the ocean, and saves AZ, almost killing herself until Crosshair helps. I don't know. It makes sense for Omega's character,
Right.
but wasn't necessarily the wisest decision.
No.
But AZ survived. They all survived. They all live happily ever after, at least till season 2. So
Yeah. And then we'll see what goes from there.
I don't know.
I did think, though, the medical capsule thing was something that was kind of cool to use to get them out.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
The one piece I think of this episode that felt maybe a little bit convenient was the fact that, and this part I wasn't 100% sure, did the city land on top of those tunnels again? Or
I think so. That's how I read it, at least.
I'm kind of
Same
shocked
here.
the tunnels weren't crushed, but
Well, or at least part of it, or I have pieces
but yeah,
of debris landed
I guess
on it.
parts were crushed. It felt a
Yeah,
little
no.
convenient that they just happened to land on the other tunnel and then were able to make like an airtight seal between the two. But I was actually glad that later on we see that other parts of the tunnel are destroyed, and it's not like they can just take it all the way back to the Marauder.
Right. Well, they also had to throw the complication of that undersea creature coming after it and kind of biting into the tunnel. And I think this also helped in AZ kind of running out of power because he was able to at least, because the tunnel at that time, he was able to at least get the tunnel back with power on to shock the creature away. So, that could have helped drain some power from AZ to create the little dramatics at the end.
Yeah.
I was glad that there was not there's always a bigger fish moment. I was worried I felt it coming because it looked very similar as well.
It did.
Yeah.
It was, I don't know about you, like I have a pretty good TV and it was still really hard to see some stuff. Like the lighting was great and it was so wonderful, but it was also very dark. I think the first time I watched it, it was on a different TV and I was having trouble seeing what was going on.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to admit something here. I watched this episode on my phone. This was not and normally it's not an issue. This was not a good episode for that.
Yeah.
The episode was so dark that there are definitely moments where I was like, there's shapes moving in the water, I presume.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like that fish, I could not see what creature that was. It was so hard to see.
Yeah. I actually, when I got to work, I was able to watch it on my iPad before everybody showed up. And I agree with Stephen, even on an iPad, it wasn't that great. And when I came home, I actually had to have, it was on my computer when I finally watched it. So I was able to see a lot more that way.
Even the computer, I think I watched it 3 times. I watched it on like one TV, like late at night, right when it launched. And so like the TV's brightness was down a little further. And so that's why it was hard to see. And I watched it on my computer and then finally I watched it on my nice TV and that was the easiest to see. But yeah, as much as I love the lighting, it's definitely a very dark episode.
Yeah. Well, they were pretty far into the Sea of Kamino. So,
yeah,
how much light could be down there.
No, I appreciate it. It's just interesting to see how far the show has come. I remember back when we were reviewing the Clone Wars, they used to talk about how they couldn't go that dark, because they would, people's TVs weren't good enough, and I guess now they've reached that critical mass where they're like, yeah, let's show some really dark scenes.
Yeah, let's push
it. It doesn't work for all TVs, but it works fairly well for, for I guess most now. I don't know. I wish it had been a bit more, as far as like drumming up excitement for next season. Like we had the moment with Nala Se at the end landing on this mysterious mountain planet.
I will say I love the design for the planet though.
Yeah, so did I.
Like really, really neat. Love the look of the bases. A+ design.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, oh, it's so good. That's got to be the same group as that Dr. Pershing works for, right?
I think so. I think that was mentioned somewhere online that if you take a look at the logo on the sleeve of the person that came out, matches the Persian
I thought
logo.
so too at first, but that you got to remember that's the Kamino cloning patch. All of the clones have that exact same icon, patch on them in Attack of the Clones as well. So
Interesting.
So like it's definitely part of the Kaminoan extended group, but and Pershing had that too. But I suspect this is now where, like I said, it was a very light cliffhanger. They're like, hey, the thinks like this. I think they said something like, "We're admirers of your scientific talents, and the Empire has big things for you." That's about it. But I have to imagine this will tie into the return of Palpatine, into whatever they want Grogu for in The Mandalorian. I suspect all of this is connected.
I say Zillow Beast. I think
I hope they do. It actually wouldn't surprise me since we're still talking about the Filoniverse effectively. But yeah, be fascinating to see.
It will be interesting going into next season how this is all going to play out, because now what are the Bad Batch going to do going into next season? How is Crosshair going to figure into the Empire with the TKs? What other than coming out saying that Omega is their sister and they're all brothers and stuff, still they need her cloning DNA, but there's still something about Omega going forward that I think it's got to be held back. There is a reason for Omega other than they need her DNA.
Yeah, well, like Nala Se still wanted Omega. We don't know why.
Yeah.
We don't know what's going on. We don't know why Omega was created in the first place.
Yeah.
We don't know. I guess the question then becomes, what does the Batch do next, right? Now that Kamino's destroyed, they're kind of back where they were a couple episodes before, right? They got Hunters back. Crosshair's still, in theory, after them, or at least, not with them.
I don't think we'll see more Crosshair chasing the Batch anymore.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
Or I should say, I hope not, because that is going to just be a repeat of what we've already seen, basically.
Right.
I mean, theoretically seen. Obviously, Crosshair did very little chasing of the Batch, actually, this season, despite being tasked with it like 6 or 7 times, but,
And like I mentioned, he's already proven that even to one of his own troops, that he cannot be trusted when it comes to the Batch. So it's going to be interesting at this point to see where he fits in to the Empire, even if they do take him back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I personally am probably most excited to see more about the formation of the Empire and whatever Nala Se is up to. I suspect the Batch will probably go back and work for Sid some more. But yeah, I don't know.
I'm sure we'll see Rex again.
I suspect Rex. Will they become more involved in the early days of the Rebel Alliance? I don't know.
I doubt it at this point. Well, it's possible. I will say, and I say this with all the hope in my heart, whatever Nala Se and the Empire is up to, at this point in time, I hope beyond hope their mission is not create a clone of Palpatine, or create Force sensitive clone might be okay. We're so early in the timeline. I'm fine with it by the time we get to The Mandalorian, but I want to see that program develop and, see where it lands. Not start out with, now that we're the Empire, we're going to start a cloning project because we want to clone the Emperor. It's too early for that. Make it more than just, I'm going to call it like sequel bait or sequel tie-in.
Like all the Emperor's best ideas came from during the prequels. Like, I'm gonna build a Death Star. It'll be ready in 30 years. I'm gonna build I'm gonna clone myself.
Yeah, like
It'll be ready in 30 years.
Right.
Or
I want to see a little more nuance beyond so we've got this big gap on the timeline. How do we want to connect this? Let's draw a line from A to B.
Right.
Like, I want to see, no, there's some squiggles in there. There's something interesting that's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, we do. There's
see.
the question of like, Rey's dad, for example, was he cloned?
You've somehow found, William, a plot line that I'm even less excited to see.
Thank you.
I'm just saying,
that's why I
it's
grow.
possible, Palpatine's like, oh, I want a child or something, right? And then maybe that's how they do it, because that would have to happen right around that time frame.
William, okay, here's the problem. I hate that idea, and I'm now like 75% convinced that's where it's headed.
I think at this point it's either Stephen, I agree with you, or just say, can we get onto the ratings before it gets a little further away to the speculation going into next season?
I
think we're there at the ratings right now. I really do, because the speculation going in, we don't know what's going to happen until they say the date of second season in 22. We don't know.
Yeah,
I think such a tight lip on this.
I think that's
go ahead.
The biggest disappointment is it's just I wish there'd been just a little bit more to get us excited for next season, like what's going to happen. Right now, I feel like I guess they could have ended it there, but it would have been kind of a disappointing ending, for the series.
Right.
So I don't feel like it worked well for a series finale, but I also don't feel like it really teased anything about what might be coming, except for maybe we'll see Nala Se doing some cloning-ish things.
But maybe going forward, that was the point. The point of this episode may not have been to plant the seeds going into next season, because right now they want to keep it all under wraps.
Sure, but
they want to whet our appetites. Because again, I'm going to point to we've got Celebration coming next year.
Yeah, but I think part of the thing of a season finale is I think you usually want to get people excited to come back next season and be like, oh my gosh, right. I can't wait for, I want to come back in 9 months. And because we're huge Star Wars fans. We will watch it no matter what. Right. But the average user, the average viewer, right, they need an incentive so that they remember it in 9 months to come back and keep watching. Otherwise they might be like, I forgot about the Bad Batch. I was watching that, huh? You want to keep it, at least get them excited, so when the next season comes around, they want to come back and watch. And I feel like that part was missing, and that's why I'm so torn on this episode. I really am.
Well, then maybe it would have worked better if what we had last week was the season ender, because that ended as a cliffhanger, and then this would have been let's call it a soft opening for season 2.
I feel like it would have been my 2 cents is I feel like that would have been too late at that point. It's like, okay, it's 9 months later. Why are you still showing us this?
Okay.
I guess you would have had the cliffhanger at the end. I don't know. I kind of, if I were them, I wish they would have released both episodes at the same time. Mm-hmm. And then just had a tiny bit more of a cliffhanger at the end. Just tease something. A little bit more than just Nala Se still doing her job for the Empire. And then I think it would have been great.
Yeah. So you want a Boba Fett on Jabba the Hutt's throne type thing.
It could be anything. I don't know, but oh well.
What you gonna do?
Yeah.
Ratings.
Yeah, Tom, you seemed pretty ready to go. Why don't you go first?
Really? Okay. Okay. I like the episode. I'm giving it an 8. I think it's kind of hard when we get to the end of the episodes. We've talked about this so much through it to kind of summarize everything. And I'm just going to say everything that I said in this episode sums up my feelings for it. It was a solid episode. I kind of agree that it should have been back to back, or it should have just been one episode and just let it be the way it was. I don't know how much of the groundwork they laid going into next season, because we have absolutely no idea where the Bad Batch is going to go to from this point. There is nothing directing them at this point other than the Marauder leaving Kamino. The only kind of thread we have is what's going to happen in Nala Se. That's it. And there's a fleet out there somewhere because Rampart was going to go join it. So I'm giving it an 8. I thought it was a pretty solid episode. So my 8 Womp Rats, they were still left on Kamino, and they were somehow able to get a little bit of the place up and running, and they're cloning food for the beast that was hungry, that was trying to stop the Bad Batch from getting to the Marauder, and that's what my 8 Womp Rats are doing right now. Kind of a downer, but that's all I could. Anyway, next.
Oh, okay. I mean, I keep saying this, but I'm so torn. I think as just an episode focused on the demise of Kamino, I'd probably give this like a 10. Right? I did really love it. 9.5 maybe. As a season finale that kind of has a lot of that extra weight around wanting to provide some answers at least this season about maybe, or some additional question marks about Omega, or the future of the cloning program with Nala Se and the Empire, or the Crosshair dynamic. I think if you didn't think about that being in the this is the last episode of the season there, I give it like 9.5, 10 Womp Rats. In the context of where it is realistically, I'd probably go with 8.5 Womp Rats. It was a beautiful episode. I love the suspense, seeing them underwater trying to escape. So cool, like seeing Kamino literally sink to the bottom of the ocean. The Tapoka City. And having to escape, and having the water pouring in, the animation, the visuals, like Omega is like how she's wet, her hair is all wet, and the water animation, outstanding. And there were many moments in this episode where it just looked like a beautiful painting, right? As you saw like the capsule going to the surface, and there's a little bit of light at the top, or maybe when you're Tapoka City is sinking under, either sinking in below the surface and the flames, or later when it's completely immersed underwater, and you see these giant pillars that used to hold the city up on stilts. So wonderfully done. And from that standpoint, it was just a fantastic episode. So overall, I'll give it 8.5 Womp Rats out of 10. And my 8.5 Womp Rats, typically, there's all sorts of creatures in the water on Kamino, but normally the reason why those tunnels are electrified is actually prevent the Womp Rats from getting in, because they actually are amphibious creatures, and they you don't want Tapoka City to be Womp Rat infested. They swim right into those tunnels. It's really bad.
It's no good.
Not good at all. All right, Steven.
Oh boy. So I'm not gonna. I've already